Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Chris Daigle. Did I say that right?
You did, yeah.
Awesome. I got that one right. I actually did a little research on yours. Watched a couple of your videos where you announced yourself. So I'm going to get one right. I have this running theme of butchering people's names. So I'm glad I got it right.
Nice.
So you had over 20 years experience in digital marketing, direct response marketing, affiliate program development and management, and business development. Chris is known for his success in scaling companies quickly, making them grow easy, making growth easy and keeping the owners sane in the process. I'm really interested in that. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And then having taken several companies above and beyond the $100 million mark, Chris is an expert at all areas in growth cycle for small to medium enterprises who are leveraging digital marketing, digital marketplaces, affiliate marketing, and mergers and acquisitions, entrepreneurship. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for
Thank
being
you,
on the
sir.
show.
Thank you,
So I
Ron.
stumbled on that a little bit. It's late in the day. I'm an early bird, so I get up at 4 a.m. So
Nice. Well, thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate having you on here. So one of the places I always like to start is just really kind of letting our audience know who you are, kind of the origin story, kind of how did you get started?
Okay.
How did you end up here? So can we start
Sure.
there?
I do. I guess I'll start back. I've always known that I was an entrepreneur. Not always. I guess in fifth grade is when my discovery was that I was entrepreneurial. When I was taught leverage and arbitrage by buying candy bars in bulk and selling them at an extreme markup from my locker in the fifth grade. Is the sophomoric or juvenile as that sounds, it was a real aha for me where I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, this is a non-traditional way. This isn't what they're teaching me at school. So that really led to uh, the bumpy road of being an entrepreneur and saying no to the traditional way of doing things. Fast forward to today, um, I am CEO of a financial publishing company that is on track to do 9 figures this year. And a big part of what we do, part of that growth that we're going to experience over the next couple of years is going to come from synergistic acquisitions, partnerships, and things like that. That some might define as M&A, some might define as business development, but some element of the blending of hey, that's smart business, that's a smart deal, let's do it. My background as far as M&A and business has really been committing to learn from mentors rather than committing to a traditional educational pursuit. I've had the opportunity to work with some, and at my own, like one of those situations where it's like, I'll sleep in the garage if I can learn from you. There's a series of those types of relationships in my career that have paid off now because I was able to compress their learning curve into, a 6-month, 12-month period rather than taking 30, 40 years to learn the same lessons. So there's a lot of twists and turns that happen, but M&A in a corporate environment is where I am today.
Awesome. And just reading your profile and stuff, you work with a lot of companies. A lot of the guys that are in our audience, they're looking at buying these the smaller end of that small to
Sure.
medium enterprises, the $10 million in revenue and below. And it looks like you work with a lot of the companies that are above that realm, you have worked with companies and taking companies from 33 million to 100 million and those type of
Yeah.
numbers.
Man, upon reflection, I would probably say that there's more money to be made in the sub 10 million. And when I say more money, for most of us, if you're, an icon of Wall Street, that's not a lot of money. But for the average business person or entrepreneur, it's a ton of money. I would say that the only reason that I'm doing things at a bigger level is today's cash flow needs are taken care of from past efforts. And this is an opportunity for me to get into an uncomfortable environment to grow. Right. So it's not that there's more money there. It's not that there's a little bit of prestige or whatever. But if I was strictly doing this as a vehicle to create financial resources for me to take care of my family, do whatever, I wouldn't be looking at the above 10 million at all. I have a belief that 0 to 1 in business is the hard part, right? I've done enough startups, even did one a couple years ago, even knowing better, and it didn't work out. So my preference would be getting those guys that have gone, or men and women have gone from 0 to 1, because I want to take them from 1 to 10, right? And it's a lot easier to do that when a business is doing 1 million, 2 million than it is when it's doing 20 million. There's a lot more. So I would say that don't necessarily aspire for the bigger volume deals, aspire for higher quantity of sub 10 million deals. You'll be happier. The deals are less complicated. You'll like the people more. You'll make more money. That'd be my advice.
Awesome, awesome. So, and I see that I was involved with a pretty good sized roll up, and the bigger the company, the more the lawyers got involved, the more you know, the word I want to use is bureaucracy, but
Yeah.
basically the more people that had to check off. And at some point during that process, we actually looked at it and said, if there's more than three shareholders, we had a scoring mechanism,
Yeah.
and their score shot down way down. Like, that was a detriment to the conversation just because of the complexity and the speed of which we wanted to move,
Yeah.
right? So the bigger deals have more people into play, more minds to sway, and so we were looking at the smaller ones too. So I could totally align with that. So inside of the mergers and acquisitions, you use a phrase I haven't seen anywhere else, and I really like it. Maybe I just missed it. That acquisition entrepreneurship. Um,
So I first heard about that. I think that that's a term that was coined by Walker Daigle, who wrote Buy Then Build. A lot of your audience may be familiar with his work. Um, but because I think it's a more accurate definition, because I just completed a program at Columbia Business School for their mergers and acquisition analysis and everything, and this was all about publicly traded companies. But what's
mhm.
happening at that level is not what's happening with, let me go get a business that's doing $1 million. So calling it M&A, yes, it's mergers and it's acquisitions, but I think that a layperson or somebody that wasn't in the space might get the wrong picture about what you're doing. They might be turned off by it, right? Like, oh, that sounds complicated. That sounds expensive. But I really like that Walker was able to coin a phrase that, oh, it's acquisitions, but entrepreneur. So it's kind of, and so with the audience that I was working with Roland Frazier on teaching in his program. And I think over a couple years, I worked with almost 1,500 entrepreneurs on either their acquisition or their exit strategy. And that was language that suited that strata of deal size very well.
I really like that. I actually get that because when I'm talking to somebody that doesn't understand what I do, and they're like, "Okay, well, where do I start? Oh, I want to learn mergers and acquisitions," and they go say, "Well, did you take one of the certifications at MIT or certifications
Right.
at Harvard?" Because they have these non-degree programs that are certifications and
Yeah.
that. And I was like, "No," and I wouldn't recommend you do that either. And they said, "Well, why? You say hire a mentor," and I said, "Absolutely, hire a mentor," but there's a difference between the academia approach, which works great for those $100 billion companies, publicly traded companies, and all that. But I think it's MIT that has over 140 something different valuation models they want to
Yeah.
show you in their program.
It's
You only
like,
need one or two,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I would say you'd only need one, but it's always good to know another way to look at things. So one or two of those, and understanding one or two valuation models well. Uh, I just don't see the need for 140 something different mathematical models to come up with the same
Yeah.
answer. Is it a good
Not where
business or
we're
not?
working. Yeah.
Right. So, so you went the mentor route. I'm a big fan of that. I have more college degrees than the average fool should have, and I joke around about that. But uh, what I learned as I got older is the college program, and it was a very valuable lesson. I went and got an MBA in marketing and thought I was going to be this rock star marketing guy. Created my own startup, and it failed miserably. I
Yeah.
created an online dating service that was trying to keep people honest in their profiles. Turns out nobody wants to be honest in their profiles, and spent a lot of money getting that thing up and running. My money, some investor money, but I spent pretty much everything I can get my hands on trying to make it work, and
Yeah.
learned an extremely valuable lesson that it didn't. After that, I realized when I wanted to learn something, like I did really well. You mentioned a program in one of your in one of your articles online or something, like of stumbling across Carlton sheets, right?
Yeah.
I stumbled across that. I was too young to buy it, so I talked my dad and let me use his credit card to purchase it. And then I didn't know I was too young to sign contracts too, so I was like 16, 17. So I convinced my dad to buy a few rental properties, and back then we could do non-qualifying assumptions.
Yes.
So we were assuming mortgages, and I didn't know about flipping at the time. I just read what made sense for me in that program and put it to work. We ended up with, probably my dad and I, 3, 4 different properties. And then after you do all your expenses and put everything in a spreadsheet, you realize you're only making $100 a house.
Yeah.
So I quickly went back to college and went to the military, got a degree, because I was thinking it's going to take me forever to be comfortable and like, not have to. My father was a painter, and I worked in a paint factory with him at the time. We painted houses, and I'm thinking I don't want to work out in the hot sun for the rest of my life. It's going to take me forever to get out of this. So, you know, hiring mentors, I get it, right? I've done some of Roland Fraser's lower level stuff. I've
Yeah.
committed that. I have a bookshelf over here that is scary. In the real estate space, there's probably at least, between the real estate and Dan Kennedy's direct marketing pieces, and I've got $180,000 worth of course
Oh yeah.
material on that bookshelf easily.
Oh yeah.
So this time I said I'm going to buy one that suits me. I'm going to go around, like, do this small pro. Everybody has an intro thing, like a 7-day.
Yeah. Those challenges.
The challenges. So I did some of the challenges. I found one that really resonated with me. It was Jeremy Harber's, because he had
Yes.
this dollar down, creative, structured, deal stacking, and so I did that program. And then my commitment to myself is I close a 6 or 7 figure deal and I do the next program.
Yeah.
So Roland's on my list. I'll probably do Carl Allen's too. I'm interviewing Carl Allen here in a couple weeks.
Great.
Um, Great. Seems like a great guy. So I'll
Carl at
go through
Agora.
the.
He was being published at Agora when I was there, so
Yeah, cool.
he's a good guy.
I'll make my rounds through them, but this time when I make my rounds through them, I'm going to make money with each one,
Yeah.
and then go to the next one, because I have to admit I'm one of those guys. I do believe I still have some real estate investment programs on my bookshelf, or not even all of them are here, but some of them with my old business partner that still have cellophane on them. Right? They sound like a great idea. It's like, I'm going to use that someday, and I bought it $2 or $3 grand, right? And then you never take the plastic off of it because you go
Yeah.
back to work busy. And
I've been to many of those, and I'll tell you, it's interesting, Ron. The people say, well, that's a lot different. Real estate into M&A. It's not. The
no,
creative real estate, getting your brain capable of seeing like, oh, well, if I do that, I can tell you that the creative real estate education that I got from Carlton Sheets and Ron LeGrand and that whole crowd back in the day, it educated me on that a deal is whatever you want it to look, whatever you can come up with, present it, right? Like as creative, as crafty, as whatever. So I'm people that are coming from real estate investing, they're the most fertile soil for getting this acquisition entrepreneurship.
I believe that. I think it's a
Yeah.
lot of the creativity and being able to structure seller financing type of conversations,
Yes.
and just that negotiation and being able to comfortably have that conversation.
Yep.
There's a lot of alignment between the two. A lot of similarities between even some of the contracts, right?
Yes.
So I've seen option contracts in use in this space. I've seen
Yep.
some other creative stuff. So yeah, if anybody's looking to make the move from, step up their game from the real estate space, this would probably be a very logical place to step it into.
But I wouldn't go the other way around. If you're in M&A already, I would suggest that the case study that Ron shared with us earlier is going to be your experience. Now, does it work? I've got friends that I was doing real estate with 20 years ago. They stuck with it. Wow, they've got a portfolio of real estate now, right?
Yeah.
However, it took them 20 years to get there. With this, you learn the skills, you team up with the right people or whatever, you just participate in the deal, and it can be a game changer your very first time out.
Oh yeah, you can. It takes. I'd say on the average real estate transaction, it takes a couple dozen decent real estate deals to change your zip code.
Yeah.
Meaning to move you up into a fancier car and a better zip code. One mergers and acquisitions deal absolutely has that
Wow.
power, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can change your zip code with a single deal,
Yep.
and I would venture to say, I did a lot of short sales. So there's not much
Me
difference in the
too.
timeline either, right?
Yep.
I did a few hundred short sales over a thing. I owned a company for a while called Tulsa Foreclosure Center. We stopped we did investor back short sales, which it looks like you were in that space too.
Yep.
And
With Easy
um,
HUD was my
yeah,
SaaS back then. Yeah.
so I probably used it for a little while. Actually, it sounds really familiar.
Yeah.
So
It was the tool being used by a lot of short sellers. It
yeah,
generated the HUD ones for short sell
yeah.
packages. Yeah.
Do you remember a Nouveau Riche, the
Oh yeah.
education company? Yeah, I learned short sales from those guys. So
Yeah. I'm trying to remember who were the principals behind that. Do you remember?
oh, I'll think of it in a second here.
Yeah.
They're doing
We,
something in the MLM space now.
yeah,
They're
we were
actually
in the same space at the same time then, Ron.
yeah.
And I know a guy, he's not in Tulsa, he's in Edmond, Oklahoma, Corey
Mhm.
Boatwright.
Yeah, I know him.
Sure. Figured you
Yeah,
did. A
yep.
local
So
guy. So it's
Corey's a
crazy.
great guy. Has some cool material,
Yeah.
and yeah. So yeah, I'm friends with him online too. So we
Yeah.
travel in the
Very
same
cool.
circles. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. As I had for those of your listeners out there, I just had my personal assistant go find me some really cool people to be on the show, and then when I started doing the background, once people she gives me a list. I looked at it. It's like, wait a second, Chris and I have some connections here, and two of the people on my current team right now know of you and know have worked
Oh.
with you. And Eric and Gio both said hi.
Oh,
Right?
sure.
They're
That's
like,
right.
yeah.
Yes. Fantastic.
So they're on my Slack chat earlier, right,
Yeah.
5 minutes before you joined us. So
Tell him hi.
I will. I will. So let's jump right back into the mergers and
Yep.
acquisitions. This is a space that it's been around since like business has been around. Businesses have been bought, sold, merged together since the beginning of horse trading or whatever you want to call it, camel trading or whatever it was
Yeah.
traded in the early days. But I honestly think it's even like real estate. There's always something new, something changing in the environment. What's going on right now in the space that you're intrigued by and that you're watching, or is there
Yeah.
anything?
A couple of interesting variables. There's a lot of cash, very cheap. That's certainly contributed to an acceleration, I think, of activity. However, are they good deals? I don't know. There's a lot of cheap money out there. Secondly, SPACs. So the special purpose acquisition companies that they've been under different names for 20 years or whatever, but I was able to peripherally participate in a SPAC that happened that took a division of a company that I used to work with and valued them at billions of dollars. So that was interesting to see how that was structured because a SPAC is, I mean, it's kind of like a black box. People are putting money into a black box and hoping that it makes money. The enthusiasm for e-commerce based on the COVID, forcing more people to shop online. Um, I One of the things that I saw in that was that people were M&A folks, acquisition entrepreneurs, were going to brick and mortars and helping them get online. So they weren't necessarily acquiring the company, but they were taking some sort of a profits interest in the performance of the business by taking them into, helping them prepare for the new landscape. Because I mean, it's convenient, and I think that the minus any supply chain issues or anything like that, we won't have as many people going into brick and mortars as we used to. So, understanding being able to see like 6 to 12 months out on what you think could happen doesn't mean you go buy those deals today, but it means you start to build the relationships, you start to get some market intelligence on what that marketplace is like, what the unit economics are of certain things, so that you can be prepared if the market does pivot the way that you're expecting it to go. You aren't flat-footed. You've already got momentum. You've already been on the phone with a couple of owners or whatever, so that you're able to best uh, capitalize on the momentum from a market condition that may occur. Um, I think, man, being an entrepreneur, not being the college guy, I've always been, kind of, the college, the stuff they teach in the MBA programs or whatever. And it wasn't until I matured and recognized the contribution and value of that level of understanding. So I agree with you. 147 valuation models was too much. But this thing that I did through Columbia, it was one of those certifications, right? It was like an 8-week course or whatever, but I had never fully been exposed to the corporate perspective on M&A. And even though a lot of the stuff, like how it manipulates stock prices pre and post announcement, like none of that really matters for us at this level. But understanding how, because as a creative real estate investor or as an acquisition entrepreneur, we're cowboys. a little bit, right? And understanding how they had codified our cowboy behaviors um, was it was it doesn't encourage me to go and spend $250,000 on an MBA from Columbia. However, I feel that I got, it was a good contribution. It was a good value for the time and money that I contributed. It was a couple grand, maybe it was nothing crazy. Um, so if you are exclusively looking at one way of doing things in the space, um, that's great. And don't fall down the rabbit hole that Ron and I have done, which is go to a seminar and buy all the courses and leave some of them. I'm sure I could embarrassingly pull some up, but don't be dogmatic about your source of training. There's a lot, like Ron's here talking to people every single week, whatever frequency that this is occurring. He's got, conversations. He participated as a student in Jeremy Harber's program. He's got Carl Allen from, I don't know what Carl's program is called now, but it used to be called CEO Dealmaker when he was with Agora. But so don't be dogmatic about where you get your information. Be open to some other stuff. Doesn't mean you have to apply it. Doesn't mean that they're right. But having that perspective, because one thing that I do know is that once expanded, the mind can never contract to its original state. So just by introducing yourself to that concept, you now have a little bit of nuance to introduce to a creative structure now that maybe isn't as cowboy, or it's cowboy but in a less risky environment or whatever. So those would be a couple of things that I'm looking at in the M&A space right now.
I like that. I like the ability to add. I call it adding tools to my toolbox.
Yes.
Right. Like
Yes.
I take these other programs not because I'm not making money with the one I just took. It's just like when you start getting volume of deals going, and
Yep.
somebody has one really cool tool that can add to your arsenal
Yep.
of what you can pull out of that tool shed and to structure a deal.
Yep.
It can make the difference of in this space it can make the difference of 6 and 7 figure kind of difference. In the real estate space, the reason I did it is doing the volume of deals we were doing, if it added a few $100s for each deal we did, then it paid for itself time and time
Yep.
again. So usually it was a no-brainer. If I could pull a nugget or two out of a program, I would grab it. It's like now I have a personal assistant. There's times where I send her to a webinar or a
Yeah.
online
I do the
thing just to
same.
give me the footnotes, right?
Yes.
I don't
May
want to sit
always
there and
get
listen,
something from it.
right? And I don't want to sit some of these things. I don't want to sit there and listen to it for 2 hours, but I bet there's something in there. Go listen to that for me for 2 hours. Write up the outline, and if it's really intriguing, I'll go attend the next one.
Yeah. Yeah.
You most of the time I can just take from the outline the stuff I need and go, okay, well that fits what I'm doing or not.
Yeah.
So
Because
I'm
at
a
this level where we're operating, it's not that we need mechanics, right? We need like concepts. And I don't mean like for somebody just getting started, but for somebody that has the mechanics down, they've got the team. We don't need to know, oh, they push the red button faster than the blue button. We need to know, like, oh, so they do this pre conversation with the attorney and before like those types, that nuance is what I'm looking for, like you on those things. And it's
right.
one little tweak, game changer, and it stays with your toolbox forever.
It's in that realm of one of the things I used to get, like in the real estate space. You go over somebody's house, you can almost walk in and go, this house at this neighborhood, probably 120 grand. And I'm in
Yeah.
Tulsa. So if that number seems low to you, it probably is. Here in Tulsa, I can actually buy houses on a regular basis in that sub 200 mark. But, you know, inside of the business thing, I've learned really quick that when I get on the phone with the business owner, if they're like, hey, I want 1.5 million for my business, my natural instinct is just to go, cool, let's see how we can get you there. Right.
To say
And
what?
to just say, cool, let's see how we can get you there. Because I
Nice.
don't have
Okay.
any information at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe it's worth more than that. Maybe it's worth less. But my objective when
I
I
like
talk
it.
to business owners is where are they trying to get to and how can I help them get there?
Yeah.
So,
So
and
it's the same conversations we had with real estate.
yeah,
Mr. and Mrs. Jones, why are you thinking about selling? Right. One of the things that I do, I'm going to actually introduce that. That's great. Let's see how we can get you there. My rebuttal is, oh, okay, great. Can you tell me how you arrived at that number? Right. Just curious. How'd you come
yeah.
up with that number? Right.
I do that
Um,
sometimes. Yeah.
because you never know. And a lot of times, especially at this level, if you're the one initiating contact, the business owner's like, hell, I don't know. What's
Right.
it worth? You tell me what's it worth, right? I see that a lot too. And
Yeah.
that'd be a great thing. I don't know. Let's figure it out together.
So you you've been in the space for a while. I mean, we all have different ways of sourcing deals and stuff like that. At How does that change through the different levels? Like you've been coaching this space.
Yep.
You've seen it at the people wanting to acquire $1 million companies all the way up to in the realm which you're playing in now. Is the sourcing of leads changing along the way? We're both you and I have a direct mail background, so it probably isn't uncommon for either one of us to just want to write a letter and send it to 1,000 people.
You
But
know, I would say that in the program I was working with Roland, kind of our go-to for getting started was first, let the world know what you're doing. Right. It was very formulaic. It was, hey, I'm looking to acquire, and I always advise people to have an ideal acquisition profile. What industry, what size, how many employees, geolocation, what are the things that would matter to you? And then go to LinkedIn. Facebook's okay, but go to LinkedIn and post, hey, I'm looking to acquire. And if you're like, well, I'm not that guy. Nobody, my friends don't know me as an acquisition entrepreneur. Say, I'm working with someone who is looking to acquire, right? It kind of takes the pressure off your friends going, wait a minute, you're an M&A expert all of a sudden? And then you just put your ideal criteria there. Now, does it flood you with leads? No, but here's what you've done. You've started to prime the pump. Those things continue to live. And if you are, um, you continue to do that with some frequency, not daily, but a couple times a month, once a week, whatever, while simultaneously going to LinkedIn and leveraging the tools that they have there to find companies that meet your ideal acquisition profile. Now, if you're just getting started, maybe you do the first dozen outreaches so that you, as the business owner, can kind of understand, oh, this is what a dialogue looks like with an actual interested party. Now, once you kind of get that down, then I would suggest you leverage a VA or an assistant or something to do at least the initial outreach. But in that, my only advice would be don't be a dum dum that sounds like, hey, glad to connect. By the way, I'd like to hump you, right? Like, how soon can I buy something? Can you buy something from me? Don't be that person. Have a real conversation, because one of the things that I learned, and particularly in the business side of things at this level, this is their baby, right? So there is an emotional attachment. There's a narrative that they've got there's a whole thing about this business. And if you come at them and say, let me buy your baby, they're going to say, no. But if you say, this is fascinating, I love this industry, like, you get to know, build rapport with the people, and then the rest of the conversation can get very casual. It doesn't need to be. I compare it to sitting on the other side of the table versus, hey, hold on, let me come over on your side. Let's look at this paperwork together, kind of thing, right? It's the real estate type, doing the
Right.
kitchen table close. Um, but if you're able to do that, you will start to get lead flow. And here's what I'd suggest. The worst thing that could happen for somebody new is that they have a ton of lead flow. You don't have systems. You don't know what a deal looks like. You don't have a ton of time. You don't understand leverage that well. So it's okay if some of you that are listening, you didn't go 0 to 1 million right away, as far as, like a million miles an hour. It's okay to start, but you have to start, right? You have to reach out, be uncomfortable, and have the owner, like, because I know the first time you get on the phone, you're like, I hope they don't think I'm stupid. They do. And be okay with that, right? Because the next time you won't be as stupid. The fifth time, you're not going to sound stupid at all. But get the rocks, get the marbles out of your mouth on those conversations.
I did years of cold calling with
Yeah.
the real estate side of it. I just calling people, just saying, "Hey, I'm here to help." But even me, who's done that and have experience in it, when I started doing the first few calls
Yeah.
for mergers and acquisitions, they were uncomfortable. Now, the roll up I was involved with, I've got around here, I've got a stack of paperwork like this. We talked to over 200 companies in a matter of 180 days, right?
Wow.
So I was spending 30 to 40 hours a week on Zoom calls with
Nice.
marketing agency owners. That said, got real comfortable real fast and
Yeah.
learned what worked and what don't. And the thing that I learned that worked the most for me anyway was getting them started off talking about themselves.
Yep.
And it's always like, my favorite thing is the origin story. Like, how did you get into the business? How did you start it? Tell me a little bit about, the path that took to get you here.
Yep.
And then the second question is you're aware I'm a mergers and acquisitions guy. On this beautiful day in the middle of January, what has you on the phone spending some of your valuable lifetime with me? How can I be of service? And so I'm really trying to get at what are they trying to accomplish in the
Yeah.
in the conversation. Sometimes they don't even know. A lot of times, these business owners you're going to talk to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they don't even know if they're for sale yet. They're intrigued because you're interested.
Yeah.
So the best thing you can do is ask more questions. I don't know where I put it. I usually have this giant metal question mark I put over here by my phone when I'm talking to these business owners, and all it is to remind me to ask more questions than I am speaking, right?
Yep.
And sometimes it's just like, hey, what are your three biggest concerns? If you decide not to sell this and you're going to run it for the next 5 years, what are you most concerned about? And learning how to help around those areas. One of the things you have on your site and a couple different places on your Facebook profile, and I'm absolutely intrigued by, and it says, "Fix your head and keep you sane." So, what
So,
is that about?
yeah. So, what I noticed with most companies, whether I'm interested in advising, acquiring, participating, whatever, opportunity exists. However, opportunity without a plan is a huge mess. It's chaos. It's what makes companies at all levels fail. So I looked for a solution to that, and the solution that I started with was something called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. Huge fan. Um, and once I recognized, and just for those of you who aren't familiar with it, you can Google EOS worldwide. It stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a framework for organizing a business so that you're able to project influence without a ton of participation. It's measured, it's clear, everybody in the organization knows where we're going. And as an entrepreneur, somebody that's wired to be a driver and a cowboy, that was a challenge because I was like, I'll figure it out, right? But as you grow, there's that whole saying, faster alone, farther together, right? But once you start building the team around you, A players, you're going to find they don't like chaos and they have options. So if you can't get your act together with your business and be an environment where A players can thrive, you're not going to grow. So one of the things that I did was that, but I've since incorporated elements of Vernon Harnish's scaling up from EO. Ryan Dice has a program called Scalable OS, which is fantastic. Google turned me on to OKRs, outcomes, key results. So there's a number of things that we use that we've actually created a methodology that we call the new way. Because if it's not the new way, what is it?
That's
It's
the
the
old
old
way,
way,
right?
right? So I found that the main problems that the business owners had when I was coming to talk to them about why they were interested in selling, working too much, can't scale it, don't have enough time with the kids, I'm burnt out, all that kind of thing. They weren't burnt out when they started. They're burnt out because they're wearing a lot of hats that their personality type shouldn't be wearing, right? So if I can come in and say, hey, owner, let's carve this piece out for you. Jane will take that because she's kind of wired that way. And we get the right people in the right seats. Things start to happen within the business to where morale goes up, performance goes up, um, sales go up, profits go up, cash in the bank goes up, all of those things. So I realized that if I were to approach an owner, they want to scale quickly. Who doesn't, right? They want to make the growth easy. Who wants to do it the hard way? And they want to stay sane in the process. And so that's kind of my buzz line is I help companies scale quickly. I make the growth easy and I keep the owner sane in the process. And I have that last part because most owners think scale means I'm going to have to sacrifice home, right? I'm going to have to stop going to the gym. I'm going to have to give things up while we're going through the scaling process. And what I do is I show them that there's a way for you to have the rapid growth. And when I say rapid, we're not doubling a business in a week. This isn't some BS. This is real business, right? But if you're measuring things over a longer cycle, quarterly or annually, you'll see, wow, the growth got easy. And they don't have to. And I think that most of us would be very encouraged to know that we can get what I want without it having to be real messy or me having to say, honey, I'm working late again or whatever. So that seems to be an appealing trifecta of characteristics that business owners like when I present it to them.
It's interesting is in that process of talking to all those marketing companies and 200 plus business
Yeah.
owners, all doing above $1 million in revenue. That was kind of our minimal like to talk to them, and more often than not, the people that we turned away and said, "Yeah, we're not interested. We're not going to move forward with them," it was mostly because they were in their own way.
Yeah.
And on our particular team, now I'm trained in a bunch of stuff, but like NLP and all that stuff, but I don't really thrive in that environment. So I
Yeah.
don't. I try not to coach others. I use it for me to catch me in the middle
Yeah.
of my own little morass in my head. But we actually a lot of I'd say we have about 75% at the time of the people we did the first call with didn't move on to the second call because they weren't a fit for the culture or, the owner. Um, and I'm going to be kind of direct here. In the marketing agency space, there's a lot of egos, and
Yes.
a lot of those guys, their ego was in their own damn way.
Yep.
They were their own biggest problem, and it's funny is like when you're seeing that fix your head and keep you sane, man. The kind of money we could make in this world if we could snap some of these business owners out of their own head and have them look at the business as a business instead of an emotional tangle of I've worked 60 hours a week for 40 years creating
Yeah.
this. So
It's interesting that you bring up the emotional side of things. I did business mastery with Tony Robbins last week. It was, for those of you who haven't done it, it was virtual. I was a little disappointed that I had to use my ticket in a virtual environment. Tony crushed it. It was fantastic. I learned a ton. In particular, I learned a lot from a guy named Keith Cunningham. And Keith, for those of you who don't know, and I didn't know this either, but Keith is Rich Dad. He was the inspiration for Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad and the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. And he, from Austin, Texas, straight shooter, he said business is an intellectual game. The more emotion involved, the less intellect. The more intellect, the less emotion. They can't sit in the same places. So if you're aware of that filter and you're asking yourself, where am I operating from on this? Do I love this deal or do the numbers make sense? Right. So that right there was a real takeaway for me because I'm a spirited entrepreneur. I'm sure emotion has played some part in even my recent transactions. But if you can, because the worst thing you can do, I've got an attorney friend in the M&A space, and he said sometimes the best deals are the ones you do not do, right? And if you can't operate from an environment of less emotion, more intellect, and evaluating the bit, not running the company or the culture or how you treat people, but in evaluating the deal, then I would submit that you will find yourself in a situation where you'll regret doing that deal, possibly, probably, as compared to a deal where it was strictly you vibed with the owner, but when we went to the spreadsheet made a lot of sense. That's the deal you want to do, not the one that says, well, if we did this and if the owner, if his big dream comes through, then this. We don't pay for businesses on what they could do. We buy them at a price of what they've done, right? But we buy them, of course, because we see synergies. But we're not paying these business owners because they've got a dream. And if I had a team of 10, I could do like. And when you get emotional, you can get caught up in the story because remember, it's their origin story, it's their baby. So hell yeah, they've got a compelling, conversation about why it's the best in the world, why it ain't the ugly baby.
I get that. In the real estate space, people would come to me. I mentored in that space for a little while, and people come to me and say, "You got to see this house I found. This house is so beautiful. I want to live in it." And I was like, "I have never been attracted to a house, right? Houses are brick, stick, mud, tape, some nails, plumbing pieces, but and I don't find any of that attractive. But the numbers on the other side,
Yeah.
those intrigue me, and I
Yeah.
see the same thing in business. People, I've got people right now that I work with. As friends because I'm not at a stage where I'm mentoring people in this space, but
Hmm.
we meet up together, we help each other do the peer-to-peer mastermind type of
Yeah.
thing, and they're like, "You got to see this business, it's so cool, it's IT and it's around crypto," and I was like, "What do the numbers look like?"
Yeah.
Right? None of that attracts me. I'm not attracted to cool widgets, cool gadgets, the best software in the whole wide world. I'm interested in like how is it working? You know, what's the average life cycle of their customer, right? Or the life cycle of the customer retention. That's one of the biggest things. Like, what's your longest customer you've ever
Yes.
had, right?
Yes.
And how that tells me how they're treating them.
Yeah.
But the same thing goes in the real estate space or anything else. You can fall in love with something and try to make it work, and that's a dangerous play. I have one of my friends right now. She's trying to sell a house she bought. I told her over and over not to buy it. It's an old Victorian money pit,
Yep.
and they dumped a bunch of money of their
But dude, it
retirement
was
fund into it.
beautiful and it was
And I,
cool and it
I grew
was,
up in one like it. I've always wanted
yeah,
to own one, and next thing I
yeah,
know, they put 50,000 into rehabbing this, and it's still worth 50,000.
yeah.
Right? So they're trying to sell it for 80, and it's been on the market. And Penny, if you're hearing this, I still love you to pieces. You're a wonderful person and a wonderful
But
friend.
listen to
But
Ron.
that was a bad idea. So you do the same thing inside of these businesses if you don't watch it. If you've only got one deal in front of you, that one could look really appetizing.
Yes.
So
That's a
I would
good point
say,
there, Ron.
you know,
When you don't have a lot of deal flow, everything you get looks good. When you have a lot of deal flow, you get very picky, right? So what Ron just said is a big takeaway. Like if you don't have a lot of deals, you're going to love it. You're going to love what's put in front of you. Please don't make that mistake. Please don't make that mistake.
yeah, that would be and
But it's normal. Everybody when they're getting started has a propensity to I got my first deal,
yeah.
right?
I think Roland Frazier, you were the one you coached for a while. For those who don't know, he's one of the mentors out in the market space. A really good one, good place to start. Just like Jeremy is. One of the things he brought up, he said your first deal is probably right here in your phone,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
so I took that to heart going through his program, and I was like, who do I know out there who talks to the people I want to talk to on a regular basis? So it could be your CPAs and stuff. For me, it happened to be a local guy who owns the home and garden show,
Yep.
right? Because I have a pest control company is one of the ones I've got, and a few other things. So the home services business has appealed to me. I have a
Yep.
background in real estate. I know all the investors in town, so it's easy for me to market to them. A lot of those guys are my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I can probably pull up 5 names, and between those 5 names, between property management company owners and real estate investors, they got 5,000 doors, or so
Yeah.
access. So I started calling Frank on a regular basis, and he owns a home and garden show here, and it's like, hey, who do you know that's about ready to retire and wanting to do something else? Right. And it's a regular conversation. And I've
Yeah.
got to, we haven't bought one of them yet, but I've evaluated 2, maybe 3. One of them we cut off early because it was a real mess. But, and I always say those deals, even the other ones aren't dead yet. Everything changes with time and circumstances. They just
Yep.
weren't quite ready. Right.
Yep.
So,
Nice.
so I believe that sourcing deals and having a long list of deals to evaluate, um, is the same inside of the real estate space. There was always a joke where you want to look at 100 houses, make offer on 10, 3, 3 of them will get accepted. You cherry pick the one. I don't think it's that much different inside of the space.
Mm-hmm.
You should be talking to 100 business owners, or maybe not that many, but you got to talk to quite a few. You run the numbers on many of them. Out of 100, probably 6 or 7 of them will have really good numbers that make sense to you, and then you cherry pick the one that most aligns,
Yep.
and go from that. But if you're not
Yep.
out there talking to business owners, then you're gonna take the first thing that comes in front of you.
And
So
for those of you who are like, well, I don't have deal flow or whatever, you're going to get there. However, one thing that you can do is you can leverage the momentum of somebody else. Hey, I know that you're in the M&A space. From what I'm seeing in the Facebook group or on the calls that we've done or whatever, you're killing it. Do you need any help? Can I help you? You don't even have to pay me, right? Like, how can I like integrate? How can I learn your process, your system? Where are you getting deals? That type of thing. There was a student in the program with Epic named Lewis. Sharp guy, was running a marketing agency. Was very eager to help the people that had been identified as kind of like the experts within the community. Uh, got to participate in the deal, and I think they ended up buying the company for $178 million, something crazy like that. And Lewis, for his participation, had a very small piece, but it changed his life, right? And it wasn't his deal. He wasn't the expert. He went into an environment of service like you do with your business owners and with your homeowners and stuff. He went into a mindset of service, and that will pay out. So if you can't get your own, find somebody like in this community that could use the extra set of hands, because boy, we got a lot of leads, right?
absolutely, and that service mindset goes with everything, right? I have a friend who I grew up with. He does manual labor now, and he does a form of manual labor that when it's raining outside, he really can't work much. So they gave him the day off. So he stops by the office one day and he's to see me, and he comes in and the phone rings. I answer the phone. Ronald Skelton, how may I be of service? The next guy calls. Ronald Skelton, how may I be of service? And after I got off the phone calls with those guys, he said, "You know what? You own a bunch of real estate. You're buying businesses now. You do all this stuff. You coach people. You own a part of the building. All the different things. Like, you shouldn't be a service of anybody. Those guys should be a service to you." And I said, "As long as you keep," and my only response to him was, "As long as you keep that mindset, you're always going to be out in the hot sun working, and you're
Yeah.
not going to own a business, right? Being a business, being in this, you're in service of others. And I really believe that. I'm a big fan of, the Go Giver, the book, and
Yep.
that mentality of, like, provide service first,
Yep.
right? So, and I think it gets me further down a lot of lines with the business owners, right? I'm talking to one right now. It's a furniture company. He's going through some family issue type of things. He's thinking about selling, and the first call was like, "How can I be of service to you?
Hmm.
Where are you wanting to get? Where are you wanting to get?" And he's trying to decide whether he needs to be there in a few months, like sell it outright to a guy like me or somebody I know, or he's willing to hang in there, clean up some of the mess that's happened in the last 5 or 6 months, grow it to something.
EOS.
Yeah, grow it to something that's um, uh,
Yeah.
uh, that's really would make a difference when he sells it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm a big fan of Dan Sullivan's Who Not How.
Yeah.
I've got that traction book over here, and probably one or two other books by the same guys, right?
Yeah.
The
Gino
Rocky
Wickman.
Fuel, yeah,
Yeah.
and from EOS, and I haven't studied EOS, and I probably should. So, I think I love building teams, and I'll say that to everybody. If you're
Nice.
thinking about doing this, I don't do this on my own. I'm a big fan of Who Not How. Dan's book, I like it in the realm that he thinks that one of the nuggets inside of that book is that procrastination isn't something to look down upon. It's actually gold. Like, when you
Yes.
procrastinate about doing something, chances are you're not the right person who should be doing it in the first place. Right. And it's a big thing. Anytime you're trying to figure out how to do something, you should
Interesting.
probably figure out who's already great at that
Yeah.
and bring them into your
Yeah.
team. So, uh, if you're out there and you're listening and you're just an EOS expert and you're wanting to get into mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling companies, I'd love to talk to you, because I don't have that skill and I know it's needed.
Love it.
So that would be
Love
fun.
it. Leverage.
Yeah. So we're about 45 minutes into our conversation, and one of the things I want to make sure is people know how to reach out to you and get a hold of
Sure.
you. So I, I have your LinkedIn profile. Is it okay if I show that?
Absolutely.
All right. So for those of you watching, make sure I get your name and your LinkedIn profile correct
All
for me.
good. Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Daigle.
So I love it. So is there a story behind the Dr. Daigle?
You know, it it is, and it fits in with the theme of what we've been talking about with service and stuff like that. When I first got involved in the marketing world, um, I I was of service to a lot of people. Just like, hey, oh, I saw this thing. I know you guys are in this space. I don't know, just random outreach and stuff like that. And because it was genuine, because there wasn't an attachment to an outcome from it, I was just wanting to build my peer group and my network. People would be like, hey, as a matter of fact, Chris, do you know somebody that? Yeah, I sure do. Right. And I was able to make these introductions that were very powerful for people. And it got to be this joke where, like, oh, you're in pain, call the doc. Your business is hurting, call Dr. Daigle. So it was a spinoff from being of service, being somebody that could help people solve problems without necessarily needing to be like, hey, pay me first kind of thing. Right. And I did a lot of work for free. I did a lot of introductions for free at the beginning of my career. And now I don't have to, right? Like, people, they know the impact of the introduction, so they come with their checkbook out. Hey, doc, we need to get in touch with so and so. Can you help us? Boom. Yeah, hold on a second. Hey, can you talk on Thursday? Great. Done. And sometimes, now guys, sometimes that introduction opens up the door for me to say to either party, if there's going to be talk of acquisition or partnerships or anything like that, you might want me to use me as a sounding board, right? And that sounding board ends up being, they start telling you stuff about the deal or whatever, and you give them a little bit of advice, and they recognize, we need more of this. Like, we need him involved in the deal. And it opens a door for you to be a participant for fee, a participant for equity, for performance, whatever. There's so many ways to do these deals. It's not always about, I now own the business. It's about leveraging the assets of that business, uh, sometimes that looks like you being on the the door of the business. Sometimes it looks like nobody knowing who the heck you are, but you structured, you rejiggered a couple things, and now all of a sudden they're doing 30% more in revenue, and they're cutting that 10% off to you every month or whatever. So is it M&A? No. Is it another way to monetize your M&A efforts? Yeah.
I think that any place where I'm trading my efforts for equity in a company, to some extent, in my world, like in my, at least the logic I've got wired in my head, it is M&A. It's the acquisition side. I'm acquiring a piece of the company
Boom.
for a
Yep.
valuable exit. The asset is my time and energy, right?
It's a good way to
Um,
look at it. Yep.
it's in, and it's there's that's the difference I see right now with all the stuff I did in the real estate space and what I'm doing now in this space. Is in the real estate space, I constantly, as a matter of fact, one of my buddies is he's wrapping up law school right now, and he said you should start sending invoices for everybody that calls you, even if you're like zero it out and say friends and family discount, just so they know what they would have paid somebody else for that
It's a good
advice. Because
idea.
for the longest time, I would answer the phone 4 or 5 times, a week, spend an hour on the phone helping somebody. And as well as I did, if you did a lot of short sales, I can untangle deed issues and
Yeah.
and complex real estate problems most people couldn't. Right. So they would call me to help them untangle it. And there's no piece of the action there unless I like pre-negotiate, hey, I'll do this, but when you close, send me a few $100. To where on this business and merger side, acquisitions and merger side of things, there's equity in these companies. And it's really easy to say, hey, if I help you solve these problems, I'd like to start off at a 5 or a 10, or even, depending on the time they require you, percent ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you want me to help, merge companies in with you and grow through acquisition, I would like, 33%, or whatever the numbers, you
Yeah.
pick a number that makes sense to them and you, of the revenue that's increased.
Yeah.
Like, so I bring on $1 million company, you know, um, I want a certain percentage of that over a certain period of time,
Yeah.
or my 10% stake now becomes 15 or 20, and then you eventually you work your way into owning a significant portion of the company,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All those options are on the table. Where I think in the real estate space, unless you're doing kind of multifamily and doing what is it called now? Trying to draw a blank, when you pull a lot of money together,
Syndicate.
syndications. Yeah, if you're doing syndication stuff like that, you could probably negotiate a bigger piece for your active, logic and problem solving ability. But in the normal day to day operation of residential, it's
Yeah.
just this
Doesn't.
opens all kinds of creative avenues, doing business and mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
Cool. So one of the things I do want to make sure of, you actually, I have your LinkedIn profile. I actually have the other thing I have up for people is how to find you on your website. Can I show that?
You sure can. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm embarrassed that the website looks the way it does today. It was an attempt for me to save a few bucks. Well, that went out the window. I've now hired a company that specialized. They did Roland's site. They specialize in personal branding websites. So the site that you see today looks nothing like the site you'll see, I think, in early March. It'll be a more accurate reflection of my business prowess, I guess.
I'd say it didn't look bad. It just, looks like a consultant's website, right? They have a picture of
Yeah,
you, tells you what
yeah,
you do. There's some backstory and stuff like that.
yeah.
Um, I've seen worse.
I think I have to. Yeah.
I've
Thank
seen
you.
many. I probably have worse. I probably have a few websites that are still out there. I was like, man, I probably should just take that thing down. But so all right. Well, is there like we've talked about a bunch of different topics. We covered everything from kind of like making sure you have sources, deal flow, to the difference between this and a real estate space. But out of all the things we talked about, did we miss something, or is there something we really should have kind of covered inside of this space?
I want to stress the importance. If I would have known the contribution that like an EOS implementation would have to a business, I would have learned it 20 years ago, and my career would have gone a completely different direction. It's a universal issue with businesses that your buddy owns or businesses that you're interested in buying. Is if it's entrepreneurial, if it's visionary led, they probably haven't done a whole lot of planning, right? And big boys and girls, they make plans and they stick to those plans and they get the goodie at the end of that, right? cowboy and cowgirl entrepreneurs that just show up and pivot all the time. And I got a great idea and I'm chasing a rabbit. They stay where they are and it's painful. So if you can come in there and get them out of their own way, as Ron was saying earlier, that contribution, they don't care where you went to school. They don't care how many businesses you bought and sold. They don't care what kind of car you drove up in. If you can deliver that, that's a very compelling story for business owners that, which business owner wouldn't like to scale easily and not have to give up soccer games or, date night kind of thing, right? And you can do that if you become somebody who learns how to help businesses get out of their own way. That would be one thing. And then the second thing, honestly, Occam's protocol, the simplest solution is usually the best solution. Most of us, especially if we don't, there's that whole that thing about the master, and I'd rather it's something about karate or martial arts, but how the master doesn't do more, the master does less. And that's what got them to mastery, was not doing 147 different valuations on every deal they did, but getting to the one or two models that fit their industry, their vertical, their goals the best. Like, so it doesn't have to be terribly complicated. And another thing, well, Chris, I don't know it all. You don't have to, but you're hooked up with a group through this and through other things that you're doing where somebody else, like Ron said, hey, if you're listening and you know EOS, let's talk. If you get the deal and you need a finance guy, or you need an attorney and she's $1,000 an hour, you bring them in on the deal, right? There's things that you can do that any impediment that you have, well, I'm not going to pay an attorney. Don't. Bring them in on the deal. Let them have a piece of the action. Maybe they say no. Maybe they say yes, right? So think about Occam's protocol, EOS, and leveraging other people's skill sets. And I think those three things would kind of be philosophically big levers for you to pull in your future endeavors.
All right. I appreciate it. And
Thanks, bro.
we're almost at the top of the hour here, so I do need to stop it. I appreciate your time. I could talk to you for for a few more hours and really learn from you. And I enjoy the time that you've given to me. So thank you for being on the show, and hang out for a few seconds after we end the podcast. And
see you, everybody.
All right. Thank you. The Investors and Entrepreneurials Professional Mastermind. The Investors and Entrepreneurial Professional Mastermind combines the traditional peer-to-peer mastermind introduced first in Napoleon Hill's famous book, Think and Grow Rich, with accountability partnering, where your peers help you ensure that you set goals, take actions, and get results. If you want to scale, blow past roadblocks, and achieve success faster than you might think is possible, I suggest you take a visit over to TIEPM.com. That's TIEPM.com, and check out the Investors and Entrepreneurials Professional Mastermind.